faces, bright minds, dreamers we stand with pride, where passion meets breakthrough, visions collide. Welcome to Glam Chemist.
Asia Fee of Alchemist Asia returns to the Glam Chemist podcast to tell us what she's been up to and explore how science can become a part of your self-expression. We discuss inner beauty, makeup, and everything in between. I hope you guys enjoy the episode as much as I did. It's been a couple of years since we've had you back. I can't wait to catch up on everything that's been happening. But for our new listeners, can you please just reintroduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Asia. I am the founder of Alchemist Asia. I'm a cosmetic chemist, a content creator, and a STEM advocate. So I do a little bit of everything, and I'm just really glad to be here. So much has changed since our last talk. So obviously we have relocated. Maybe for us, that's a little more obvious for the folks who don't know. We started in Southern California, which is where I grew up, but I'm now here in Alaska, which is where Alchemist Asia is now based too. And so we have just grown exponentially, which I was really not expecting. I thought things would slow down, especially moving away from one of the biggest hubs in the beauty industry, which is near LA. However, it's still just very much thriving, and I have the biggest support and community out here too. So it's really just given me the opportunity to get more in touch and more interactive with even the different people in the industry too. So even though I'm further away from everybody, I've gotten more connections. I've got to work with neat manufacturers and smaller businesses. It's been incredible. And one of the biggest things that has been just such a huge change was I started working with this market that's run by probably one of the youngest entrepreneurs that I've ever met. She owns her own store here in town, and she started these markets that are specifically catered to women-owned businesses, but she curates them with a theme. And I was able to debut my first ever lip lab there. I've been wanting to do it for years, where I got to do a like demo because people have seen my products. I've sold my products in stores and markets and online, but they've never got to see like an actual demo happen. And I think that's what really put us on the map, was showing people the science behind their favorite products and getting them to interact with it. We had kids who were obviously over the moon for it, but the adults were so crazy for it too. When they you just see them lighten up. It was just so great to see. And I love doing these markets too, because completely different than any other ones I've done in the past, where it's kind of a mixed bag of folks. This one, she made sure that there was, it was really, really curated. It's not like anything that you're getting from Temu. We're not getting anything drop shipped. Like, these are actual artisans who are producing incredible products. So all the people who were surrounding me were also people who have so much utmost respect for the industry that I work in. So, getting to work with people like that also heightened it too. I actually got to, this is like one of the crazier things that I got to do with Alchemist Asia, was I actually got to sell at a booth inside of Ulta Beauty. We have the most northern Ulta Beauty location here in Alaska, and I got to sell my products in there. So even though it wasn't in the actual like storefront itself, we got to do a pop-up event in the Ulta, supported by the Ulta team there. And it was just incredible to see that they were helping, uplift such a localized brand like myself, so small. So that was probably one of the craziest things we got to do. And just from that, I've been growing, which really has made me happy, because I was so scared that things were going to slow down once I got to Alaska. But again, the support here has been so incredible, and I would not have been able to grow without them.
That's an amazing opportunity to say that, you've debuted in Ulta, even though, you're a smaller brand and folks may not know your name yet, but they will. Meet Alchemist Asia, the brand turning curiosity into beauty. Explore their full collection at alchemistasia.us and follow Alchemist Asia on social media for approachable science-based beauty education. Alchemist Asia, reducing science stigma. Now back to the episode. So for folks who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about all the things that is Alchemist Asia? Because it is
Absolutely.
a pretty broad umbrella that you've developed and grown even more since we last spoke.
Yeah, when I first started Alchemist Asia, the general idea has stayed the same, of course, and that was making a brand inspired by science. Our tagline is reducing science stigma, and that is all about, getting rid of the negative stigma associated with science in the beauty industry. We've seen it come in and out where it's used as an aesthetic, but at the same time, it's been just kind of shunned in a sense too, especially with the rise of clean beauty and paraben this and paraben that. There's a lot of terminology that's thrown around in the marketing beauty space that really just puts such a negative stigma onto science. And so I'm here to, bring it back and kind of introduce it to the public where it's more of an educational portion without being condescending. That's the other part is I want it to be playful and educational without it feeling like, oh, okay, like we know more than you and you should just listen to professionals. It's more so of just here's some more information and it's the opportunity for you to learn more instead of just going blindly into these different beauty brands. So that's exactly what Alchemist Asia is it's all about science, but it's all about being fun too. Like I wanted to make something that was, really catered to the needs that I feel were not met. So I wanted, custom lipstick shades, but I wanted them more affordable and in different textures, and that's exactly what I was able to achieve with this. So when I first started, I kind of went gung ho with so many different items, but the thing that really put us on the map was our test tube lip gloss. That was my first product. That was the one I really wanted to make sure was really, really fine tuned, and I love it to this day. I hated sticky glosses, so I was able to make one that was actually a lip oil hybrid before they started coming out with all those like oil hybrid ones. So yeah, I feel like obviously I was not the one to pioneer. I know a lot of cosmetic chemists were in the works of it too, but it was really still very early stages before we got to see huge brands like Elf Cosmetics launch one of the biggest launches of their beauty career, in my honest opinion. Since then, branched out from the color cosmetics to, hair products. I've done body products, tons of skincare, of course, but over the years, I've realized where I wanted to niche down, and that's definitely sticking to more of the color cosmetics like lip products and skincare. But ultimately, a bigger goal would be to expand into maybe eyeshadows. That's a big request that we get out here.
Because you've been conquering every part of this industry in such a beautiful way. You're now a content creator, you've worked as a model, you are a brand owner, and you continue to work in the field. So, how do you balance all of those hats at the same time?
My goodness, that is a great question. I would have to say I'm just chronically a person who can't say no to a cool opportunity. I think with where I've been working, I just have so many goals in my life and so many different things that I've like aspired to do. I'm constantly networking, navigating, and scheduling. That's my biggest thing on how these things come to be. When I see opportunities, whether it's for myself or for others, I also try and find a pathway for that too. Like I look into deadlines, I look into how this can benefit others, or, is this something that aligns with me? That's just how I really go about my day. It's all about direction, how I'm feeling, and that translates into any work I do for the day. Before I even, go into the actual physical work that I do, it's all about, okay, where am I sitting today? What direction am I wanting to go in? I feel that that's how each day is successful for me, is if I go in with like a great mindset of like, okay, how can I make this a great day? Am I feeling okay? Like, am I wanting to do just skincare? Am I wanting to do make my makeup? Am I wanting to get as many like emails like read as I want to? Like that's what really just sets up the tone for the day, if not the week.
I think this approach is very interesting. I tend to get easily overwhelmed with a to-do list. I am not a type A person. I'm a type C if possible. I'm learning now how to approach those things without getting overwhelmed. But when you're, a lot of our listeners are either in college or just starting their programs, when you're really in the weeds, it's hard to think of priorities. But if you take the approach that Asia just mentioned and ask yourself, what at the end of the day will I be satisfied and happy knowing that I completed? And how can I approach the day to make sure that I'm showing up as my full self? I think that's probably the safest place to start.
I think it started honestly when I started creating content was, I had to really start monitoring what I was doing on socials because it wasn't just a post and go, It used to be like that on socials, but it's not anymore. Like that's quite literally a separate platform now where you're connected to people and you have to keep up with conversations. I do protect my peace, believe it or not, when it comes to social media. So even though I'm on it constantly,
Cheers.
all of my notifications are off. So I do not like want anything popping up for Instagram or TikTok like on my like actual phone itself. I only leave that for my emails. So when I got more serious about content creation and I realized like people interact with you a lot more, that's when I was like, okay, this is no longer regular social media. Like this is where I have to treat it seriously. And if I had to hear that ping all day while I'm in the lab, I'm like, that's not very professional. So I was able to really adjust my lifestyle starting from that point. I think that's where everything really changed in how I navigated my day. So notifications off on my socials and I would check my emails first. That's kind of like how I would start my days. And it always ensures too, because even though I write everything into my planner and I also use a Google like calendar, like I use all of it, technology is not always going to be there for us. Then again, my notes will not always be there, and neither will my memory. So having like a point A, B, and C to like triple check yourself is like something that like ensures that I don't miss meetings, that I don't miss like, oh, I needed to bring that to the post office today. That's how I know that I will, like, even in my most tired state, everything will get done. And that's probably the most type A approach to things, but like
No, I love it.
it just makes sure that I can function because like if I forget something for the day, I get like so overwhelmed with like, oh no, I didn't do that one thing. So this is just like a good way about it. And I will add on alternative days and something that I did when I was doing like a social cleanse. It was a recommendation from my friend Celeste, and she had recommended that in the morning, I don't answer my phone and I journal first. And that was something that I did try for a while. And although it's not something I can do every day now, just with how fast like work is, on the days where I want to like have less screen time, maybe for people who are like listening to where they're like, okay, approach A was not for it. This one's a great one. Journaling before you even touch your phone, just putting all of your brain jam. It's not even something that has to be like really like proper and etiquette or not etiquette, it doesn't have to be well put together. I usually just put
Mhm.
my first like brain jumble, like, oh, what did I dream about, or like, oh, what are these like last notes that I thought about like right before I went to bed, like is there anything I'm concerned about today, like, or am I hungry, like literally I make sure that I would write it down in my journal before I would touch my socials. And that also was another great routine that I do in between this one. So my life isn't always like constant like chaos and like strict. Like on the other times where I'm like, okay, it's time to take care of myself, that's the alternate way that I start my day. And I find having a balance of the two also helps with how I not only stay organized and like approach these opportunities, but also stay sane as a person. Because at the end of the day, if I'm not taking care of myself, these opportunities are not going to happen.
So how did you manage in Alaska to full delivery of every look every time? How did you navigate that one?
Absolutely. So the lab I was working in literally right before I moved to Alaska, like a month before I moved. So that lab was actually much more relaxed as far as like dressing. Obviously, like we had our PPE and our coats, closed lab shoes, which I always adhered to. That's another thing too. People are like, "Oh my God, you can't dress, like hyper feminine in the lab." I'm like, "You absolutely can. You just have to do it safely." And there are clothes out there that do that. So again, fashion was another outlet where I was able to express. So like it didn't just stop at the face. It was all about how I felt underneath too. And I even found with that job, even though I had the flexibility to start dressing like myself again, it was just not something that was fully acceptable because, I felt like I had to present differently. Like, okay, I just graduated. Like, yes, I was able to do it with the makeup, but now I'm kind of worried about like how I dress. I was still looking for my identity through fashion. I already had my makeup identity, but I did not have my fashion identity yet. So I was wearing like all these blouses that were definitely like not my style, but it just like it was almost like I was pretending to be someone else. And that was actually when I felt like less than a scientist, was like I was constantly like worried about like how I was presenting myself in that lab. So I actually did like pretty okay makeup during that era. Like it was just pretty generic makeup, like coming from a makeup artist, like it was like soft glam, you know? So I would do soft
Yeah.
glam for this lab, but I was so much more focused on what I wore. Whereas when I got to Alaska and I worked in a lab, which is like a lot more gruff and hardy of a job, we're talking that I was wearing like the full long sleeve, long pant PPE. Like I was wearing those full suits because I was working in petroleum at the time. Because I was wearing something that was like, okay, this is a more intense lab. Obviously, I took those precautions. I wasn't wearing like a dress
You're
underneath
good.
like my coveralls, you know. I was putting more attention into my full beat because, again, it was where I was able to move around my expression. So, like, in the previous
Mhm.
lab, I had like the softer glam face, but I was more focused on like finding my fashion identity. Whereas, like, with this lab job, I was more focused on my makeup again. So, my artistic capabilities totally fluctuate depending on where I'm at. And also, again, adhering to what the lab needs are and making sure that I'm safe. So, in that lab, like I said, I was totally fine with doing a full face beat because, you know, I couldn't wear anything else. And I had honestly the most supportive staff. That was the craziest part. I was so nervous about it. But I think because I had already had so many years under my belt of like, this is who I am as a person, this is how I show up, it read across exactly like that too. Because people who are that far into the industry go either two ways. It's either like, we are here, we are working, like, as long as you get the job done, we do not mind anything. And then there's the other people who believe that you have to be a certain thing in order to be where they are because they feel like they've gone through so much more, or they feel like, you know, scrutiny got them to where they are and that they have to be a certain type of way in order to be successful. And I find that 99% of that lab, which was again all men, they were super supportive, and I got to go in every single day with my face beat and like not worry about it. I was actually
Hold on.
more concerned with our gate agent, like, because I worked on a military base. I had more run-ins with them than I did my actual lab mates because they saw the work I did and took me more seriously, whereas like the gate agents thought that I was like a secretary for the lab. So like
Oh my
again,
gosh.
unless you're in the field with each other, like people truly just don't know. So it comes down really to like people's perception of you, but like the people who saw my work really understood like who I was, and I was able to communicate that through everything I did. So that's how I approached it. I did it all throughout my undergrad, and I was so scared I wasn't going to be taken seriously, but you know, my work proved itself. That was the best part, was, you know, I was able to do this successfully with a makeup on, and I got scholarships, I got fellowships, I got awards, and I got a job straight out of university that some of these other people who doubted me didn't. And, you know, it wasn't the makeup that got me that, it was myself. And I think that was
You
just one of
looked
those
good
different.
while doing it.
And
Yeah.
that's the craziest part. So,
Yeah.
you know, it was mostly just to, you know, prove it not only wrong to them, but prove to myself that I was on the right path. But where I grew up, that was just not something that was fully accepted. That was not an opportunity I would have. It was not something that people, you know, really uplifted you for. In fact, you were made fun of quite a bit for wanting to pursue anything in any capacity that could be considered artistic. So, you know, it was really tough wanting to make a break in this too, and that's actually what started Alchemist Asia. Was, you know, I was really into makeup very early in my age. I started playing with like lipstick and like understanding how to blend eyeshadow, and I started wearing like lashes full time when I was in high school. And you know, I was called the makeup girl growing up, and if you are a makeup girl, you know exactly how insulting it is. Like, it's never a compliment, it's so derogatory because there's almost this, again, stigma associated with, you know, if you wear makeup, you must be vapid and unintelligent. And so somehow that correlates to what I'm capable of, which is entirely not true. And at that point, when like I mentioned, I was really trying to find affordable lipsticks in shades that I wanted because I was just really low income. I was working three jobs to make sure that I could afford the stuff that I had wanted. I discovered cosmetic chemistry through my research on how to make my own lipsticks. And that's when I was like, okay, I need to pursue chemistry. So I was studying so hard. I was like seventh in my class because I really wanted to get as many scholarships as I could so I could move away and pursue chemistry far away from all the ideologies that were in my hometown. And it was literally the last month at my job, which was at my family's restaurant. I was bussing tables, wiping them down, full beat on my face, of course. And I overheard my mom talking to some customers who were sitting at another table. And she was like, "Oh, I'm so proud of my daughter. She's going into," and I told her I wanted to go to cosmetic chemistry. She told them I was going into cosmetology. And again, no hate to my cosmetology folks because they do incredible work. But the look on those people's faces they gave when they said, ah, like that makes sense. It was just a stake through the heart. It was so disheartening. And
It's
so
so
I
relatable,
went
yeah.
and yeah, I was like, okay, like, prove them wrong. Went and pursued chemistry, specifically organic. It worked for me, but I also found out it was one of the most difficult. And I just went straight into it. And from there, I learned that chemistry had so many more opportunities within itself, of course. So that's actually how I got more connected into research and what's happening in different conference spaces. And I was just so hungry for knowledge, and that still applies to how I handle things today. So like you mentioned, I've done so many things today, and it's mostly because I strive for experiences, and I feel like I'm so rich in that, where people tell me all the time, they're like, "Oh my gosh, how are you able to afford to do this?" I'm like, I don't. It's just more so that it's a mindset where I'm like, I just want to learn so much more. And, working in the cosmetic space, beauty is connected to so many different things that people don't realize. So, like you mentioned, when I finally finished my degree in chemistry and I was able to finally launch my cosmetic brand, it was all about really just like showcasing not only the science know how that I had built while pursuing my undergraduate degree, but it was also a way to highlight my artistic capabilities because, like I said, I love doing my makeup. I was really active in the different drag spaces too. And so I was hearing all the things that people were vocalizing there. So through all of those different pathways, I was able to start creating content because I was like, there's all these voices and I feel like no one's like listening. So I started producing stuff where it started small, talking about my science journey, and then I started branching out and talking about my makeup because, beauty influencers were huge, but I feel like there were not a lot of beauty scientists at the time. So I was trying to bridge that gap. And then through there, I was able to promote my brand more. But then I started to connect with other like STEM nonprofits who were looking for, hey, like, we are not seeing any representation in these spaces either. So, like, here's this neat opportunity where I got connected with more folks, and one thing led to another, and I came across Reinvented magazine, and I got to go to my first space gala. I was featured in their magazine. I actually got a cover with them, getting to talk about cosmetic chemistry. They had previously had a lot of people in aerospace, so I think I was one of the first chemists that they encountered. I got to do some modeling work, just all kinds of stuff, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. But like ultimately, when it comes down to like how am I able to manage all these things, it's more so that I don't. They kind of they come to me, and I see it as an opportunity to really just highlight all these spaces and how they connect so much. And that's my biggest thing too, is you don't have to be in one industry or the other. There's a way to be involved in all of them, and they all cross over at some point. And I think it's truly beautiful, and that's what I try and showcase with both my brand and my content.
What advice would you give young chemists that love beauty and science?
The easiest way I think I could communicate this to the people who want to be more confident in the makeup and science spaces, or people who have no desire for whatsoever, treat makeup like you do science. It's okay to fail. There's going to be a time where you have to experiment with makeup and it's not going to look good. You know what I mean? And you're going to be worried that someone's going to judge you because you wore a tinted lip gloss, a very nude tinted lip gloss, and that's going to feel crazy to you. And it's okay because, that's how it is in the science world too. It's baby steps. It's so scary because we really just don't want to fail because, people are going to perceive us so differently. And so that's how I pursued myself in the beauty space and the science space, was like, okay, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to, look a certain way, or like, I will start presenting myself in a certain manner, because ultimately, like, you will not be a successful scientist if you are not taking care of yourself. And, with, like I said, that whole identity crisis I was having in the lab, that was when I was doing, I feel so poorly. I was, just so anxious about other stuff, where I was like not as focused on maybe like what I was like working on. So I was using tons of whiteout, where I was like making like small errors and like having to rewrite my like reports, because I wasn't, coming to the job as my best self. And if your best self is in full makeup, why wouldn't you want that to be successful in the lab as well? So, again, understand that there's going to be failure, but understand that you really need to be yourself in order to approach both beauty and science. And they absolutely go hand in hand.
I appreciate that. I really do appreciate that one because confidence is hard to come by even when you're presenting your work in science. Only because, there's so much peer review, there's a lot of eyes on it, there's a lot of opinions on how you should be approaching things. And I guess it does overlap into your overall aesthetic and look. If you're already a little bit insecure about how to present to folks, or if you're already getting a lot of scrutiny for your work, the last thing you want to show up as is something that stands out or looks different. But I guess right now Asia is giving you the permission to say like fuck that. I'm going to show up as my full self. You're going to like what I present. I'm going to be the smartest person in the room and I'm going to look really good while I'm doing it. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I have just a couple more questions. I would love to hear more about what you have planned for Alchemist Asia on the social platforms and how it's evolved because now you're presenting a lot of new things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, two major things that are in the works. One of them is the more recent one. So, next month, we are going to be doing another one of those markets I had mentioned previously. So this will be my second time hosting a live lab within the year.
I
And
love that.
that's been a wholly like big goal for myself. So getting to do it again, and the last one, it was really just kind of like, again, almost like a trial. Kind of getting consensus on how folks are feeling about it. There were some people who felt like, this isn't really like for me, but a lot of people really enjoyed it. So I think having it again is going to be really exciting. And because the theme changes, I have the flexibility to showcase how much more creative I can be in it. So it's not just like the same thing over and over. Like, it truly is a unique lab every single time they participate with me. So I'm really looking forward to that. So all the stuff I've been teasing on social for that has been for that. So the market theme is espresso hour. So the lip lab theme is going to be all about like coffee. So I'm almost doing it like a cafe bar, and we're gonna have
Oh,
like really nice like shades that are like warm, like nudes and like deep browns, and they're absolutely gorgeous. And they're gonna be like with flavors like mocha, mint, vanilla. I think it's gonna be so perfect for the holidays, and I'm looking forward to that. So,
yeah.
and then the second one, I briefly touched base on it too, but something that I've always been pretty open about is how active I am with like a lot of drag performers. We've been really fortunate in this last year to have a lot of big names actually come to Alaska for the first time ever. And of all of the big queens that I've got to meet, when they get connected with me, I get to come to the shows and stuff like that. We have like huge discussions all about cosmetics, because, again, as someone who does special
I
effects makeup,
love that.
it's super important that things last. I love bold colors. Like, I aspired and like looked up to a lot of people like, RuPaul and Cher. So, I wanted the really big stage makeup. And so that was something that we could connect on. And for the same for them, they found and struggled with finding things that worked with their lifestyle as well. There's brands out there that are, either professional or, accessible, and they needed something that could perform somewhere in between, because a lot of the times, again, we're on a budget. So of the conversations I've had with like three or four of these like queens, like from RuPaul's Drag Race even,
Oh my
there
gosh, that's
might be some
amazing.
collaborations maybe in the future that I can't
Asia,
I can't
that's amazing.
we've had some discussion there, but there's a lot of want on their end, and there's a lot of things
I
that they're
love
like,
that.
I'm having this problem, like, with this And I would say the biggest difference between like the needs that they're having is with some of the newer queens, it's like, okay, I really want to see like this fun way to like, do this type of makeup. And I'm like, okay, fun, creative, unique, innovation, love it. Whereas on the other end, you have like
Mm.
some of the more traditional queens who are actually looking to revive things. So, we've had a lot of products that no longer exist and have gone extinct, which is so unfortunate. And so they cling onto these products for dear life because they're like, oh my gosh, you don't understand. Estee Lauder doesn't make this shade anymore. So,
Mm-hmm.
crazy things like that where they're almost wanting to revive something from a time period that was so quintessential and important for the queer community. So, this shade was like commonly worn around like the drag communities, things like that hold a lot of importance. So there's two different ways it can go, and a lot of these conversations are happening, and I could not be more proud to be that for them, especially because the people I have actually worked for as far as formulation services are always women of color and groups that are completely underrepresented because they're told no by any of these other
Mm-hmm.
manufacturers, which is just so disappointing to hear. So hearing that their voice was actually heard was just something that I really just couldn't ask for even more. And same for them. I think they were pretty grateful. And so getting them, either connected with someone who I know could help them or even being that source for them was just something that I was really excited to be a part of. And Alchemist Asia is for everybody. And so I'm happy that that's something that we're able to achieve here in the near future.
Just to go full circle with the conversation, you moved to Alaska thinking that you would have less opportunities, or at least not have the same opportunities that you had while living in California. But you've paved your own way and created an entire avenue that people, I would say, like mastige is not necessarily completely on the pulse of. I quote RuPaul daily in my life. Um, so this to me is like one of the most extraordinary things I've ever heard. I'm so incredibly proud of you that you've even been able to have these conversations. You headlined, didn't you?
I have, so I still do actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to
Oh, that's
perform,
amazing.
yeah, in Canada for Science as a Drag, which is now an award-winning performance and is actually
That's amazing.
it's backed by the Research Center or the Research Institute of Canada. So it's like it's a huge deal and they're constantly growing and or advocacy rather. They're doing incredible work and just they're doing a lot of like pop-ups where they're doing educational portions where they're in full drag and teaching like kids different science experiments too. So like it is really for all ages and it's catered to whatever the needs are for the community. So again, science has its way into so many different facets of life, and the same for
Yeah.
cosmetic chemistry. And so, like, when people are like surprised to hear that it goes in this direction, like, oh, wow, I would have never expected drag to come in touch with chemistry. Like, this is that conversation where, like, we completely like show that bridge. And it's exciting. No, I love this industry so much.
Yeah, you've made the most of it too. Like you've done some extraordinary things and it's only been a few years since we last spoke and it's grown so much and I'm so incredibly happy to say that I'm your friend and I've watched you grow. Like it's so
Thank
cool.
you.
I'm proud to announce that we've launched the Glam Chemist app. Using the app, you can send in voice, video, or text questions for the podcast and chat and network with other listeners. The app's in beta right now, and your feedback will shape what comes next. So become a part of the experiment and visit the link in our bio today to try out the new app. I need to know the trajectory of chemist, drag, modeling, ending up in Fashion Week. Please.
Great question. Yeah. A lot of like anytime I do any presentation talking about my career journey, I'm like, it is not linear whatsoever. It was not a path I
I
ever
love it.
expected for myself, but it all started with makeup. Literally all the opportunities I've ever got in my life all started because of makeup. So I discovered makeup. I wanted to make makeup. I discovered cosmetic chemistry, went to chemistry. After I got into chemistry, I went fully into industry. Into industry, I still did my makeup. And then I started creating content. And once I started creating content, that's when I started noticing all these different gaps of things that I wanted to approach. So, um, all because of makeup, I got to where I am now, where I started creating this content, like I said, where at this point I had already started my brand and I was talking about cosmetic science on that page. But on mine, this is where I would say, as far as all the other cosmetic scientists that I follow, whether they're formulators or, packaging, everyone is so uniquely different. And I would say they're very industry forward first, which is awesome because all of their educational content is incredible. And when I look at my own content, I'm definitely a consumer first because that's how I started was, I was always the makeup girl, I loved looking into what launches were coming up for the holidays for like Sephora. I would read that like it was like my Super Bowl. So, going into that sort of approach too was how I was able to get these different opportunities down the line. So, you'll have to hear me out on this. So, after I started working in this
Okay.
industry, I was working full time like makeup and like creating content talking about that makeup. I would use my makeup to talk about science. And from there, I got connected with people in different industries, one being aerospace. I made a lot of aerospace friends who got me connected with Reinvented Magazine. And I was able to be in their calendar, in their magazine, talking about like my industry. And eventually, they did a STEM fashion show. And I was able to model for it because I had previous experience here in Alaska where I got to walk for Alaska Fashion Week. It was just kind of like a once in a lifetime thing where me and my friends discovered that they were auditioning models. And so we went and auditioned and we got in. And it was, very like minimal. It wasn't nearly as big as New York Fashion Week just because like Alaska Fashion Week is like so much smaller, but it really got my foot in the door of like, okay, like, I'm learning so much more. Like, I got to talk with the makeup artist behind the scenes, which was like what I was more excited about. Like the fashion was really neat, but I really loved seeing industry professionals and how they approached such a fast-paced environment, understanding what needs needed to be met and what products made it into their makeup bags. Like that, those were the questions I was asking. Naturally, as a scientist, you poke so many like holes into things and you want to know everything and how it can be improved. So that's kind of like where I got started as far as like fashion. And then, like I said, I got to do the STEM fashion show with Reinvented Magazine, where all of the designers were either inspired by science or scientists themselves. And that was a really neat experience where we got to combine the two because I had previously been talking about the beauty and science and beauty, but also incorporating more fashion content into that now that I started building my fashion identity. So I got to do those. And like I said, too, I was a consumer first in makeup. So I actually got a gig in New York where I got to model for Kulfi Beauty. That one was also a once in a lifetime thing. It was a whole Hail Mary
So
where I had
cool.
to get a red eye flight to to New York, did the shoot, and immediately flew back that same night in time for my mother's birthday. Like, and didn't tell her. Like, it was just
Oh my God.
it was too cool of an opportunity, and I only got to be connected with Kulfi Beauty because I had previously met Priyanka, the founder, through another panel that she and I had been on. It was a beauty panel where I got to represent cosmetic science and she got to represent Kulfi Beauty, and that was before they launched. And so all of these are
Mm-hmm.
somewhat connected through this like thin line, and it leads me to others all these opportunities. So, you know, before we even got to the New York Fashion Week, these were all the experiences that built me to who I am today. Was like, okay, I can do this thing. I can approach fashion, I can approach beauty, and I can be a professional in it with like my science background, but I could also be a part of it outside of just being a consumer. So like that was where I was building more knowledge on that. Now, leading up to New York Fashion Week, with all this modeling experience under my belt now, I've done other stuff under just those experiences I've listed too. Um, I got connected with some folks after doing a really neat project this summer. I met a lot of cool people in neat industries. More specifically, I met a fashion designer who makes swimsuits built in with SPF. And that's amazing to me. Like for any
That is
cosmetic chemist,
so
I'm sure
cool.
they would fawn over the idea. They're like, oh, thank God. Like there's another vessel for people to be more protected when they're out in UV exposure or just direct sunlight in general. So instantly, I was just so enthralled with the idea. Her pieces are also like sustainable and like recycled from other materials. And then they have the SPF coverage of 35, which is to ensure that you have like something like comfortable to wear, but also you have that additional layer of protection. And just again, I love seeing that like it's something you don't see on the regular. So we got
Yeah, obviously
connected
it's innovative.
um through one of those crazy projects that I did, and again it came because of my content creation. So that's how we like met there. And after some long talking, she was telling us that like she had an upcoming show in Vegas and she was curious if we wanted to attend. And originally I was supposed to just attend and watch the fashion show, but then they actually had a couple models fall through, and she was like, "You have modeling experience. How would you feel about modeling?" And I was like, "Okay."
Talk about right place, right time.
Oh, no, quite literally. It was so scary at first because, again, I was next to some professional models. Like, it was hilarious to see 5'3" mid-sized scientist in between all these like 5'11" girls.
But you
I will
served.
say.
I saw the pictures. You were serving. You did such a good job. It
It
looked
was
amazing. You looked you were having fun. It was so cool.
it was a ton of fun, and from that, and she kind of got to see, how I presented myself too. She even asked me, she was like, "Wow, for someone who's never like walked like a show like this before, you like carry yourself." And that's how when I had to explain to her, I was like, "Oh, I actually do drag." So it's all about, understanding your audience and having stage presence. And that was something I had to build over the years, of course, too. So it went directly into how I modeled, even, because a lot of people are still shy in that industry. And so she, kind of nodded and she understood and she was like, "Wow, that's incredible. I didn't know that about you." So, a month later she was like, "Hey, New York Fashion Week is coming up. How would you feel about modeling for New York Fashion Week?" And I almost like
That is
peed my pants
wild.
because
Oh my
I've
gosh.
always wanted to go. Once got a close opportunity to go as an attendee like years ago, and it didn't end up happening just because of like other like work priorities. So I was super bummed that it couldn't, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that was like my one chance." But now that it came back up, like I'm attending my first New York Fashion Week not as an attendee, but as an actual model for the show was a crazy concept to understand. And so I had to like kind of feed into my delusions like, "No, this is possible. You can do this. Like, this is something that you're totally capable of." And I got to model one of her pieces and walk the runway. And that was the most cameras I've ever seen in my entire lifetime. Like, it was a wall of cameras. It was so crazy to think about. But it was neat too because we got to do interviews afterwards and talk about the show. And, people talk about like the fashion side of it, but I really got to hone in more about how her pieces are developed and the technology that went into it. And I think that was so much more valuable too,
Oh,
talking
that's
about
so
like,
cool.
my perspective as both a professional, like industry folk, and also as a consumer. Like, I think it's really neat to see both perspectives, like as someone who loves fashion, loves beauty, but also knows what it takes to get these products to where they are. So I think it was just the neatest crossover, just like it was for the STEM fashion show. That's very much how it felt too. Was I love spaces where you get to see them both go hand in hand, and that's exactly what it felt like. And I was blessed to get to walk with other folks too, like my good friend Emily, who is an aerospace engineer. And she's doing huge projects like sending things to the moon. Like, we got
That's
to
amazing.
do this together, and I thought that was just such a beautiful experience. So yeah, I got to do that. And, even just doing that in itself, too, like I mentioned, everything always happens because I get connected with someone. So, when I was out there, I was connected with someone who I'd followed. So she is an engineer and she's worked for like one of the big four. She's incredible. Like, she's done awesome work, but she, like myself, she has such a creative soul where she was like, "I need to be able to express that." So she actually started her own design company. So she's a designer, and so she started creating fashion pieces as just kind of like her love language and storytelling capabilities too. So I instantly like, oh, follow, like, of course, like naturally, like her pieces are cool. She's an engineer, like why wouldn't I? Like, so neat. Well, we found out that we were both going to New York Fashion Week and we got connected again. And I was like, "Oh my God, is this like one of those chances where we might be able to see each other in person?" And then we found out our fashion shows were on the same day. So I missed her show and she missed mine, which was like so sad, but it was totally fine. But when we were messaging, I saw that she had posted on her story about all the different heels that her models were going to be wearing, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Those are the identical set of heels that I'm bringing for my backup as like for my show, and we thought it was like so hilarious. The day before her show, she actually was down a pair of heels for one of her models, and she reached out to me and she was like, hey, is there any
Oh my
chance you're not
gosh.
using those heels for this show? And I was like, well, technically no. So like, mind you, these were like 6-inch pleaser heels that I probably wasn't supposed to
Yeah.
wear for my fashion show anyways. They told
But
us
you
that we were
brought them anyway.
I brought them anyways
Yeah.
because, I was just like, my intuition told me to. I was like, what if they let me, like, what if they let me walk in these super tall heels? Because I can walk in them because, I've been doing drag. So, like, naturally. But I brought, like, tons of other heels too because, like, again, type A, very over prepared. I needed to make sure I had everything perfect for my first New York Fashion Week. So, when we found out that they were the identical pair of heels, she was like, I've been to every store in town and we cannot find these heels for some reason. Is there any way I could borrow them? And I was like, oh my God, absolutely. And so because of that, she was able to complete her fashion show, which is again, I want the success of her show. And there's only a 50% chance I was going to use them anyways. So like, why not let her have like better odds than myself? And mine went fine. I had backup heels. Everything went great with our show. So it was the right decision 100%. So we actually met up for coffee, like after all of our fashion shows, after everything like calmed down a little bit. And we got to talking and we had a conversation much like ours where I talked about like my different experiences in the fashion industry and having the understanding of how it functions, but still not being like heard, even though I, give like my professional advice on stuff. So, like, especially being mid sized. And, when you're mid sized, you're oversized compared to most modeling physiques. And
Mhm.
that's just something that's existed for so long. So after talking with her and sharing all of my experience always being put into like an oversized shirt because I was usually like an afterthought when it came to some of these runways. She was just so like hurt to hear that. So we got connected and we are also collaborating on a piece now because of that conversation we had just purely by us talking
That's
about
amazing.
being such like feminine women in both the fashion and beauty STEM spaces. I am an inspiration for a piece that
I
she's
love
designing for
that.
me. So I really cannot wait to see what it's going to come out for. Like we've already done my measurements, which was like such an intricate process because like I've never been measured like that. I usually give my measurements and it's like super vague to any of the modeling like gigs that I've done, but this one was like she was making sure this was going to fit me properly. So we had a whole conversation on even just like the structural engineering for like even like the bust, for instance, like something I wouldn't think about, or rather other places haven't thought about when it comes to me because I'm shaped differently than most of your standard models. So she was really just like it kind of felt like the shoe was on the other foot in a sense because like that's how I felt when I would do my consultations with folks who like felt ignored in the beauty spaces, and I felt like my voice was being heard in the fashion space, which had never happened because again I always started in beauty before I did with my fashion. So it was just such an incredible experience, and had I not done it, had I said no to it, like, oh, like, this isn't directly in my industry, like, it could be a waste of time, I would not have been connected with her. And, I think about all the things I would have missed had I not taken those opportunities. So I'm really, really grateful for all the friends I've made and all the progress we've made to bridge all these different gaps and show that all of it is really connected. And so that's kind of the journey on how I got to New York Fashion Week and how it's still happening. Even though it was in
That's so
September,
cool.
like the fashion has not left at all. In fact, it's progressing into bigger projects that are coming up here soon.
That's amazing. I'm so happy for you. I can't wait to see how it all turns out. I would like to ask you one more question before I let you go. What advice would you give to folks to find these kind of opportunities? Like, obviously, you've been networking, and that's a big part of it. What are some resources that people could get into something similar, whether it's in the beauty space, the drag space, or fashion?
Oh my goodness. Very good question. Start local. Always start local, seeing what's around you. You'd be surprised. Like even for myself. Like I said, I grew up in SoCal and I did not know that I was completely surrounded with incredible opportunities, but I was completely blinded to it because I was told my whole life that like a real job is like being a doctor, being a lawyer. Like those are the things that people in my high school were like sizing up to be. I was the only one pursuing chemistry for the sake of chemistry. Like most people only did it because they were going into the medical field. So we didn't even know these type of things existed. And little did I know, in my backyard, like the biggest industry was there, just like existing. And I didn't realize it until I moved to Alaska. Like you said, you're like, wow, how did you get these opportunities in Alaska when you didn't, like, living in California? And it was just, I was completely blinded to what was in my own community. So, really start small, start having conversations. If you're into like drag, always support your local drag. And it could lead into, maybe debuting in an amateur hour show, or, starting as newbie. If you progress well, and you might be able to meet someone who can help like mentor you, and then eventually you get into bigger performances, and then you'll do what I do, where I perform with huge stars like Widow Von Du or Laganja Estranja. Like it's crazy. So the same applies for any industry you want to be in too. So if you want to pursue the fashion industry, get in touch with local designers, or start getting connected, follow people that you enjoy. Same with beauty. Like if there are niche creators that you like, start following them and kind of understanding too. Always starting small. Like it's getting knowledge first. I think that's the biggest thing, is like people want to start out immediately and they want to have their foot in the door. And as much as I even wanted that too, it all started with, getting as much information as I possibly could. So as long as you're open to learning, you will be able to get as many opportunities as you want, because you just have to be able to listen and hear for them, because they're out there calling for you. You have to be able to like be prepared to hear it when it comes in.
Send your own video and audio questions to be featured in future podcast episodes and social media promos, and help us create a community to network and provide information. Submit your message via video, audio, or text, and we'll make it a feature in the future episodes. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I'm so glad we reconnected. I can't wait for the next one.
Absolutely. Yeah. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure. For those who are listening, I actually just started a channel on my Instagram. So my Instagram is at Asia Fee. And I have a STEM opportunities channel where I collaborate with a lot of different STEM creators who we just flood that entire chat with anything in STEM. Whether you're interested in aerospace scholarships, or you want to, again, start learning more about cosmetic chemistry. There's even like clinical trials for like beauty products that are coming out. So anything STEM related or artistically STEM, like we put it in that chat. So if you want to learn about opportunities and completely seize them right there, then and there, it's a great way to do it. So it's completely free to do. It's completely open to the public. Please join it. I highly encourage it. I'm also available on TikTok, also at Asia Fee, and I post a lot of my beauty and science content. I would say that one gets more content just because my Instagram is like more curated on conversations and networking. But if you are just really like hungry for more knowledge, my TikTok will have more videos for it.
I'm proud to announce that you can find the Glam Chemist podcast on any platform that shares podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Lemonade. Be sure to follow our content so that you know who our new guests might be every week. Also use that platform to ask any questions or suggest anyone that you would like to participate in the podcast. This entire platform is for you. We will work together to build this community, and my goal is to share all the information you might need. So feel free to ask. I'll do my best to speak to those folks so that we can all share in the conversation. New episodes will be released every Wednesday. You'll hear some familiar voices and find some new ones. The Glam Chemist podcast is a Hija de Lolitas production. The episode's jingle was created by Producer AI. Recording and editing is done by your host, Genesis Velasquez.